Hello, and welcome to another episode of Real Hawk Talk. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at HawkBlogger, and it is a 2-0 week 3 edition of this show. But more importantly, we get to bring one of the best guests we ever get to bring onto the show back for a reunion. Michael-Shawn Dugar is with us from The Athletic. Mike, how you doing, man?
Doing good. I'm doing good. Happy to be on.
I think that's a little understated. I think you're doing better than good, aren't you?
Yeah, I had a good off season. That was very good. Got married. A daughter turned 1. So yeah, personally, I'm doing great. And then professionally, whenever the team's winning, that's great for me. I tell the guys sometimes in the locker room, if we're talking about it preseason, I'm like, dude, I don't care if you guys go 17-0 or 0-17. Just be interesting. But preferably. Depending on the site of the Super Bowl, definitely go 17-0 if you can. This year it's in New Orleans. I would love a free trip to New Orleans for a week. So I'm doing great.
Yeah, well, and all those are amazing things, even better than what I thought. Although I knew those items, I figured you were going to take an opportunity to talk about this past weekend and your your old
Absolutely.
school.
There we go. Go Cougs. That was a great weekend. I actually got 2 Wazoo hats up here. I'm all in. This one's from my freshman year. Oh, that was great. That was a great weekend. It was so hard to watch the game in Boston. I landed and I called like 3 sports bars, and one of them was like, Peacock, what are you talking about? I was like, all right. That was the third one, I think, and it was a place that I'm told is dedicated to sports bars, like the local Buffalo Wild Wings equivalent, and the lady she acted like I was speaking French. She went and checked with the manager. I was so disappointed. Me and Bob Condota, Seattle Times, we're both Cougs. I was like, let's find a place to watch it when we land. And I hit him up. I texted him. I was like, dude, I just called 3 places and they all had no Peacock. So I think he streamed it at his hotel or from the airport, and I streamed it at my hotel. But either way, watching with my headphones on from a downtown courtyard did not take away from the thrill of that 4th down stop. I leapt out of my seat, scared all the people in the lobby. And it was just a great day. I ran outside in downtown Boston, just skipping through like Will Smith in The Pursuit of Happiness when he gets the job. Just felt outstanding, and saw an old couple wearing Coug gear walk by me.
Oh,
when I was just sitting outside, just trying to calm down from being on cloud 9. An old couple saw my hat when I was sitting down. They were like, "Hey, go Cougs!" And I was like, "All the way in Boston, baby." Go
that's
Cougs.
nice, man. You, Bob, and Bump all getting to celebrate. If it's gonna happen any year, I'd rather it happen this year. As someone who's a casual Huskies fan, this is a year I don't really mind if they drop a game here or there. And I'm cheering for the Cougs, man. They've been done a little bit dirty by what's gone on with the Pac-12, and glad they got a little something to celebrate. But you mentioned the Peacock thing. Let me bring in Nathan Ernst at Nathan11 and Jeff Simmons at Real Jeff Simmons. We were out at dinner like the first week of the season, and we were trying to get what was it, like the Thursday night game or Friday night game on. And we were like, the waiter was like working with us. We were trying to like cast from our phone to their TV because we were streaming from they were working really hard. We could not get it. And it's like, does the NFL understand them? They must be getting enough money that they don't care if people can't watch. But it seems a little bit confusing. Like Prime isn't on a lot of these places, Peacock, so it's a little bit confusing. But
it seems like the communal nature of things has decreased a little bit, and you see that with the rise of podcasting, as well. Like the kind of people are in the content space betting on the fact that you're probably consuming this content alone, with headphones in, whether walking your dog or on a flight or on a long trip, as opposed to before it was like, oh, I'm creating content assuming it will be consumed in mass. Music's even like that too. Stuff dropping on Apple Music at midnight Eastern. It's not so everyone can gather around a speaker and listen to a new song or a new album. It's right on your phone at 12:01 or whatever. So I think that's like the business model for all content. The rise of podcasts, music, sports. So they're assuming you're on your laptop or your phone, not at the local bar, not at the airport. So, I mean, that's obviously wrong for a lot of us, but I feel like that's the shift, at least that's Michael-Shawn's take on like the shift in media consumption. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Oh, it's great. And for folks that don't know, Mike has a great podcast himself, since we're mentioning podcasts, CX Man to Man. Absolutely must listen. Great content all the time. So make sure you check that out as well. And follow him at Mike Dugar on Twitter. Nathan, man, how are you doing?
Been a little bit of a day, I'll be honest. I was hoping to get some more. I was going to try to cram some more all 22 before this. But yeah, unfortunately didn't get that in. But I'm here. I'm alive, getting to chat with Mike, and yeah, it's all good.
I'm gonna give you and Jeff first crack at Mike here. I was just kibitzing with him, you know, because I get a chance to talk to Mike a little bit more often. But I'd love, Jeff, I'll give you first opportunity. Welcome to the show. Good to see you, dude. What's on your mind? What's on your mind? Let's talk Seahawks. Let's talk football.
I know, Mike, you were obviously kind of close with Pete. He was on your show a few times. What's been the vibe getting to know a new coach like? He's obviously a lot different than what you've been covering your whole career with the Seahawks. What's been that vibe like so far?
It's a feeling out process. You know, it kind of feels like a long first date. I told this story on my podcast as well, that my first time meeting Mike, he joked, this was in Orlando for the NFL owners meetings. And I was on paternity leave when he got hired, so I didn't get a chance to come to the intro thing. So in Orlando, and he didn't go to the combine. Felt like we were running from each other there for a little bit. So we finally meet up in Orlando. I see him at the bar, and I introduced myself. And the next day, so as you guys know, there's that coaching breakfast thing in the morning, you know, for the NFL owners meetings. NFC goes one day, AFC the other day. I run into him the evening before the NFC day is going to be. I'm like, hey, what's up, Mike? We're just crossing paths. He's like, hey, man, how you doing? You know, hey, man, tomorrow you and me, you know, before the breakfast, we're going to do an exclusive for like 30 minutes. I was like, word? That's what's up, Mike. Thanks. He was like, no, I'm just messing with you. And I was like, I kind of stung. I did. Because I was so hyped. Again, because I had not met him before, you know. But that's just kind of a glimpse into his humor, though, you know. So, like, that he's told some other really bad jokes, you know, in the media, like when we've run into him, you know, other places. We're kind of like filling each other out on like the jokes, you know. Brian's been there when we're trying to fill him out on more serious stuff about like injuries. You know, he told us last week, he was like, I understand your guys' job. I want to help you, but I care about my team a lot more. That's a difference from Pete, you know, asking him about some of his slogans. Mike McDonald has, you know, make it right. 12 is one, chasing edges. Methods are adaptable. Principles are just like principles are set in stone. Methods are adjustable is another one. That's a wordy one. And then like seeing all the ways he's making the building his own, you know, Brian can attest. They have little boxes, like probably about the size of these paintings behind me, that show a picture and then the final score for all of the wins over the last 2 years. And then under a sign that says stack wins, they're building a similar thing for the new one. They just put up the Denver one. I imagine the Patriots one will be up tomorrow. So just little stuff like that. They replaced the Ricardo Lockett special teams. There used to be like a board. So Brian, where we walk in and see that 12 is one thing right there. There used to be a Ricardo Lockett kind of like special teams checklist of all the things that they try to hit each week. It'd be like, have better starting field position than the other team, no turnovers, return one for a touchdown or something, be like 8 or 9 things. That whole chart is gone. You know, just small stuff. It's been, you know, like I said, a big filling out process. It's like, yeah, going on a date, learning somebody. Do they leave the toilet seat up? Do they like to tip when you guys go out? Do they want to pay when you know, if they're the one who suggests the date? You know, do they walk? Does the guy make sure when you guys are walking down the street that the guy is closest to the street? You know, there's all these little things like trying to check each box as you get to know someone. It's kind of cool. The injury thing sucks a little bit, you know, just for doing my job. But, you know, as long as he's not just like privately giving the injury stuff to like the national guys and just blowing off the beat writers, I don't care. As long as we're all in the dark, it's fine.
Nathan.
I have a question, but I'm also curious about the professor's question here. How'd you end up at Wazoo? Are you from the east side of the state, or what'd that look like?
I went to Franklin High School, South Seattle, I guess Mount Baker area. I did some college, get ready for college classes in, forget what program it's called now, but when I was in high school, and my advisor there was like, what do you want to be? And I was like, oh, you know, I kind of want to be like Stephen A. Smith and like Skip, you know, just like, because that was when First Take was really hot. This is like 2009. I was like, yo, that looks like fun. Hollering at about sports on TV. You know, that was the hottest show on the planet at the time. And then she was like, you should probably go to Wazoo then instead of UW. Like UW has, and this is still true, more of like a print path, which is obviously what I went down. But at the time I wanted to do broadcast. And she was like, Wazoo School of Journalism. She gave me the Edward R. Murrow speech and everything. I was like, oh, I'll go there. So then I ended up going there. But I'm from this side of the state, but my aspirations to be like those two, I don't have those aspirations anymore. But at least bank account purposes, I do. Like entertainment purposes, I do not. Like, but that was the plan, to try to get on TV and be like the guys on Around the Horn and the guys on First Take. Because I mean, you look at the landscape of this is still true. You look at the landscape of sports talking head kind of television, at least on the major networks. For all the black people on there are generally former players for the most part. So I was trying to like look for examples of people who weren't. So it was nice to see Stephen A. Smith on Around the Horn. It's nice to see Jay Adonde, Kevin Blackistone, Bomani Jones. I'm probably missing
Michael
a few
Wilbon.
people. Yeah, Wilbon on PTI. And then just some of the other people they used to that they still have who were like newspaper people. That was kind of cool, but particularly the non-athletes who look like me, I was like, that's cool, because otherwise, you guys can see it's what athlete just retired, throw them in the booth, you know, and that's just hard. I can't compete with that, right? So my goal was to be like Stephen A. and Skip, and my professor said, or my advisor said, go to Wazoo. I listen.
Nice. So my question was going to be, you know, you've been having to feel out a new head coach and learn about Mike, but you've also had to feel out a new, I don't know if coworker is the right word, but you've been having to feel out Brian. You having to deal with this dude like every day. What is his most annoying trait, or like, has he done anything funny? Did he like walk into a door? Like, give us some dirt on Brian.
I don't know if I have dirt per se, but what has been noticeable is that he's the newest on the beat, and it's almost like
oh, you're gonna say something nice, aren't you? Don't say anything nice.
It's more of just more of just an observation that you can kind of take however which way you choose. But a lot of us have done this song and dance with every step of our job. We've done the first day of training camp. We've done the first day of pads. We've done the presser before the first preseason, where we try to see if the coach will tell us who will play. We've done the post game after the scrimmage. We've done the first presser after cut down day. We've kind of done it all. And I mean, this is like my 8th year, so I haven't done it a lot. But like by comparison, you got like Maz Vita, Greg Bill, Bob, Tim Booth, Curtis Crabtree, like all kind of done it. Even like Jen Mueller and John Boyle, you know. So at least for me, what kind of happens is I end up not asking a question because I know what the answer will be. You know, because like I said, I've done the song and dance. But Brian has like almost like a youthful exuberance in this way. Well, he'll just go at something that I've asked probably 5 years ago. I'm just like, oh, they're gonna say this. But it's like I almost forget sometimes, like it doesn't matter. My reader still needs to hear it, you know. But that's good, you know. It'll seem like something very simple, very obvious that I know what the answer is going to be. I could almost project, even with a new coach or a veteran or a rookie, or you know, like something like. And this is not a specific Brian question, but like a guy who's in his second year, you ask him what's the difference between year 1 and year 2. They all say the speed of the game, right? They all say the game has slowed down for them, right? So I tend not to ask that anymore. But Brian will, you know. Because when we get the answer, and just because I don't need to hear that from Derek Hall doesn't mean the audience doesn't want to hear that from Derek Hall in year 2, right? So I think that's been I don't know if everybody else on the beat can tell, but that stood out, and in some cases it's kind of been helpful, you know, fills in some blanks when we're all just kind of sitting there being awkward and not or not asking a question. You know, Brian will jump right in. Like I think he kicked off DK Espresso today, I think, or Mike McDonald's, maybe both. You know, so that's like I said, it's not. I don't know if it's good or bad, but an observation. And now that I've said it, you guys will probably see that difference too, because you know, people who've been doing this for a while, you know, we can kind of jade is not the word, or stale is not the word, but maybe complacent, I guess, is. And if you're just now getting to this, like you're a lot more fired up, and in a lot of ways that can be beneficial.
That's cool.
I think you disappointed Nathan. He was hoping I thought you'd go to the spandex when I was biking there for a while. That certainly is where I would start. That's got to be humiliating at some level.
Nah, man. I think I'm mostly just paying attention. You know, my thing is always the questions. You know, that's the main thing. You know, that's where we all are kind of interact and kind of do our thing. seeing how the guys react to the big checks. That's a first. I want to say a training camp for me, probably a first for a lot of those guys too. They look. I don't jump in on your interviews, but like just looking from afar, those guys seem to be pretty fired up. They're like, oh hey, I got some cash coming my way. Maybe they might like go back down and be like, oh damn, this is for my foundation. But I've never been presented. Imagine just seeing one with your name on is probably kind of cool.
Yeah, I hope so. Got some more plans down the line for that, but we'll see. It depends on a lot of things. But it's funny you bring up the question thing, because you generally don't ask questions till toward the end of any of the pressers, and every time you ask, it's something that nobody else has asked, and it's in a different angle. And so like, for me, like I pay a lot of attention to you, Brady, Bob, like a lot of guys that have done it, and the questions that you guys choose to ask. How much, like, when you're asking those questions is because there's a specific angle that you've already got that you're trying to get information for, versus you're curious what the answer is and you might actually get a story if you get an answer that you weren't expecting?
It's like 50-50. Like I think today I asked DK if defenses are bluffing a lot more, and that was purely out of curiosity. For something that I may do down the line, but I was just kind of generally curious. Whereas I asked Mike McDonald today specifically about his assessment of their offensive run game, and that was for a story that'll publish tomorrow. So it's just kind of 50-50. Later in the season, I'm probably spitballing a little bit more. Like I used to come in my first season with like questions written in my notebook. I don't ever write any questions down. I'm just freestyling. And then with a lot of new players and coaches, I usually go towards the end just because I like to observe them, whether they have like a little quirk about them. For instance, Brian Schottenheimer would say the word again a lot, even if he had not previously talked about the thing before. Sometimes the first question he'd be like, again, we got to be more effective on early downs. It's like, dude, you never said that earlier. You're just saying again. And they always just have little stuff, whether it's a player, coach. Rick Willen always says, if he doesn't know what to say, he starts every answer saying, shoot. And then he goes to his answer, just so I'll spend a lot of time observing, which is why I usually go towards the end of things. Cause especially with new players, and I just want to see how you respond to a question you like, how you respond to a question you don't like. I think Mike gave a really long pause to something the other day. It might've been a question about his O-line. He paused for a while. I think that's what it was. Just kind of observing stuff like that. And then I'll write that down. So that's usually my goal, is to wait towards the end, observe, unless it's something really pertinent, injury stuff. But the good thing about the beat is the most pertinent stuff I usually don't have to jump in on. If there's a big injury, Bob will get to it. Brady will get to it. Greg will get to it. I'm not usually tripping. But if I usually do try to have something different, particularly with guys we get a lot. I struggled with Russ towards the end there. I was like, dude, I got nothing for you. It was cliche king. It was really just pulling teeth to get anything that felt sincere. But even then, on the flip side, someone who is sincere, like Bobby, I'm talking to him for so many years at those Wednesdays, I'm like, man, I don't got nothing for Bobby. He's been an open book. He talks every week, so it was very tough. So yeah, it's a little 50-50. A lot of the time, I would say maybe 60-40 more of my curiosity, because I'm always watching the league at large. I read every other beat writer. I look at trends. I'm watching film of other teams. So sometimes I just am genuinely curious what, DK is thinking, or what Bobby would be thinking, what Gino's thinking about stuff, particularly Mike McDonald, because you guys have probably seen, you get him asking about scheme and ball, he'll let it fly. Ask him about himself and he's, stick in the mud. But you get talking about scheme and philosophy and stuff, and he's chatterbox, which that's something I've picked up on in the last month or so.
Mike, I know we only have you for a few more minutes, but one thing I wanted to ask just about the team and your assessment there. I ran into Aaron Schatz, formerly of Football Outsiders and now with FTN Fantasy in New England. And, he was like, yeah, the Seahawks are like what I thought. They're like a mediocre team. They should beat New England, but they're not that great. What's your assessment of this team through 2 games, having watched the team for many years? Like, what's your assessment of the Seahawks right now?
Big picture, I really think that I've been trying to do this in my coverage, is I try not to compare everything directly to and make all the good things feel like an indictment of the previous staff, because philosophically there's a lot of similarities there. Like, remember DK told us that Grubb came in there, their first meeting was like, we want our bread and butter to be run the ball. You know, like, it doesn't matter that they have the youngest coach in the league and then a college coordinator. The fundamental element of football remained. Let's, you know, be physical, tougher than the other guys. All these old school meathead type of ideas are true, right? Whether your coach is 70 or 37, you know? So I say that to say, like, a lot of the things that are good are similarly good. And a lot of things that feel like drawbacks are similar drawbacks, you know? Like the Patriots game, I thought was super Pete game. That was a Pete game through and through. It couldn't run the ball. And defense couldn't stop the run. You know, Pete game in the last 2 years, I should specify. Couldn't run the ball. Couldn't stop the run for a second. And what they had? Geno throwing the rock. You know, what the OC do? Eventually abandon running the rock. Shane did that a bunch last year. Clint's defense looked like that a bunch, you know, the last couple of years. And what did they have? Geno to lead a game-winning drive. Led the league in game-winning drives last year. So that felt very Pete-like. You know, there was a controversial fourth down, go for it situation. Actually, 2, depending on how you want to define controversial. You know, very Pete-like, where I felt like we were always asking Pete about fourth downs. You know, it was Tyler Lockett after the first game said, like, you can't win the game in the first half, but you can win in the second half. You know, he said that in like their all access thing. Like, so much of the stuff is the same. And I feel like it's going to take some time for the new staff to do all the things that Pete's staff did well and be good at the things that they weren't good at. You know, I like so far that Mike McDonald has a very clear process for his fourth downs and his 2-point conversions. I asked Pete about that directly. Him and Tater, they were pretty much winging it, you know, on challenges, fourth down stuff, you know, and it felt like it. It felt like they were winging it. You know, Mike has a very clear process. That's good to see. But you guys can see from watching the game, some of the drawbacks are still the same. Trying to run the rock, red zone, you know, pressure stuff has been good. Some of the scheme stuff has been different, you know. They mix in a little bit more RPO stuff with the offense. I'm not a big RPO guy. I just feel like the linemen aren't adjusted well enough to avoid ineligible downfield penalties. And, you know, we see that happen. Saw it happen. Laken Tomlinson, 8 yards upfield, you know, last game. So overall, I think that they're headed in the right direction, but I'm still holding out. I don't say hope, but I'm still evaluating in terms of like, are these guys better than the previous staff? Because philosophically, there's so many similarities, you know, between what they want to be on offense and defense, even the multiplicity on defense that Mike's talked about, you know, like Clint aspired for a lot of that too. Rotating safeties, sim pressures. Ken Norton was a huge sim pressure guy. You know, that's not just a Mike McDonald thing. So I pretty much am like, can you just win more games than the previous staff? That's it. Because it feels like they're just taking a different route to some of the same conclusions, you know, which is the NFL in a nutshell. It's not a ton of scheme variety. This isn't college. So I've been kind of just peeping that, waiting to see how things develop in that regard. And then I just want to see the last thing. And I got a little bit more time than I said, if you guys want to get some more questions in. But the other thing I want to see is whether the team is still in Mike's identity. You know, that was where Pete, when people asked me, was I surprised Pete was gone? If you'd asked me before week 18, I'd probably say no. Seeing the cigar thing at week 18, I was like, yeah, this is not a Pete team no more. There's no way in God's green earth a Pete Carroll team is smoking cigars, no matter what the occasion is, after going 9-8 and missing the playoffs. That's just not how he works. This is a guy who, after they won the Super Bowl, he was like, let's win again, like right away, like the next day, you know? So I want to see if this team adapts Mike's image. That'll take a little bit to see. They'll have to face some adversity for us to really know. But I feel like if they're on the right track, but I feel like a lot of people are like, when Mike's something good that Mike has or something new, they're like, oh, Waldron would have never done this, or Pete or Clint. Now, I don't think we got to do that, you know, because so far a lot of this stuff is pretty similar. It's just new, you know, and new doesn't always mean like better, you know, it just means it's new.
Yeah, that was a really cool answer. You always have good perspective. That's why I like Renew so much. But it's only been 2 games, so I don't know how many conclusions you can draw. But has there been like a specific player or position group that surprised you at all? I know they haven't played the best opponents so far. Bo Nix has been pretty garbage. But any player that's jumped out to you that's been different than you expected?
I think we're getting like the best version of Julian Love. I think, you know, and because I'll be honest, when he made the Pro Bowl, I was pretty surprised last year. And I think Julian said he was too, actually.
Yeah, he
go
was,
back and look. Yeah, even he was surprised. And not that he didn't think he was having a good season. He just didn't think he was having a Pro Bowl season. Neither did I, He was like a part-time safety for a lot of the season too. He wasn't even a full-time guy, which is pretty rare. He struggled tackling for like the first month of the year. He wasn't alone, but he was one of the ones doing it. I mean, last year against the Panthers, he had like a really bad whiff in open space that led to a touchdown that comes to mind. Had some against the Lions too. So like he turned it around later, but even then, I remember that like huge PB, he had DPI against like Tutu in the Rams game down to LA for like 50 yards. Like that stuff was pretty common for him. He turned it around. But like I feel like the last month of the year was one of those like if you just bottle up that and get that from him, you're gonna get a really high level player. And I think that is what we're getting. His tackling super well. He sees the game really well already. Super smart. Had a really good PBU on Hunter Henry. Probably was their best player on defense in week 1. Like he's been nails. And I think there's a few guys who like if you just bottle up a certain game from them or a certain stretch of time from them, they're like a Pro Bowl caliber player. For Trey Brown, it's like you just bottle up his like first 4 starts as a rookie and just get that every week. He's a great player. Reek, you just bottle up his rookie year and get that every week. Spoon, you just bottle up like his, I want to say 3rd through 5th games of the year. Like there's a lot of those guys, but for so far, I think Julian has been closer to the Pro Bowl version of him than the initial version of him. That's been like a pleasant, I would say surprise because I knew he had it in him, but it's just been nice to see because he is one of those guys who when he's on, tackles well, plays the ball, doesn't blitz a lot, but don't really need him to. Like, and one of the things I was kind of concerned about when they signed him initially was like, oh man, is he going to handle the single high stuff? Because he was on the wrong end of like a really bad Devontae Smith touchdown against the Giants, or when he was on the Giants, really bad, played it super poorly. It was basically the worst version of what that Eagles play could have been that he won the Monday night game. Like it was the same type of ball, and he just totally misplays it against the Eagles in 2022. And you see that's a perfect example like his growth. He makes that play to win his team a big game. So yeah, of all the people at the 2 games, it's probably Julian that's like Mike McDonald seems to have quote unquote maximized, early on.
Well, this was more time than we thought we'd get with Mike. And Mike, I really, really appreciate it. I just want to say before we let you go, obviously I have a ton of respect for you and the work you've done. And it's been really cool. You've been welcoming. Not everybody would have to be, having someone come in and that hasn't done all the stuff that you guys have done to build up your careers and work to get to where you are. And I've really appreciated it. So I learned from you and love your coverage and appreciate you coming on tonight, even while you got a kid crying, ready to eat, and wife probably wanting you to stop working and helping. It just shows what kind of guy you are. So, man, tell folks what's coming up on Man to Man. What's coming up next?
So we're up to 3 shows a week via YouTube. Seahawks Man to Man. Our YouTube channel is Seahawks Man, the number 2 man. We're on Instagram, Seahawks Man to Man. We're on TikTok, Seahawks Man to Man. We're doing 2 shows a week audio. We do our post-game show that drops every Monday, or at least the day after every game. And then we have our preview segment. We always have someone who covers the other team. This week we had Isaiah Smalls II, covers the Dolphins for the Miami Herald. Chris and I have also, my co-host Chris and I, have introduced a new segment called One Big Thing, where we watch the film and give like a post-film analysis each week. So that's in our preview episode. Because with this new staff, we just felt like people want to know what we think after watching the tape too, not just looking ahead. And also, not gonna lie, some of Seattle's opponents are pretty like boring. So we're like, instead of spending 50 minutes previewing the Dolphins, let's do 25 minutes and then 25 minutes on the Seahawks. So that's every Wednesday during a regular week. It'll be next Thursday, I think, for the Lions game. So lots of stuff on Seahawks Man to Man. We're on Apple, Spotify. We're powered by Blue Wire Podcast. So if you go to Blue Wire, we have our own Seahawks Man to Man page as well. I think we're on iHeart as well, since Chris works there. So everywhere, pretty much, if you're listening right now to this and watching, you can do the same thing. Wherever you're listening to this, Seahawks Man to Man is available there as well. So I appreciate you guys having me.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you for coming on, and make sure you follow him at Mike Dugar on Twitter as well, man. Thank you, and I'll see you tomorrow, man.
All right, you guys have a good one. Peace.
All right, take care. That was Mike Dugar from The Athletic. Great to have him. Always gives great answers and really thoughtful dude. Fellas, I haven't had a chance to talk to you since the game ended last week. Lots been going on. Nathan, what's your kind of take on this team right now?
I alternate a little bit. There's I have moments where I'm like, man, the Bo Nix is terrible, and the Patriots crushed the Bengals, but like, are they actually good? And they kind of got carved up by Jacoby Brissett, and a lot of it was like somehow they made Hunter Henry look good, and that's a little concerning for a team that we've wondered about, like how good are these linebackers in coverage. And then, another Rams injury will come rolling in, or another quarterback in the NFC will go down or something. And I'm like, this team can make the Super Bowl. Like, I don't think that's crazy. So, it's a little bit of a roller coaster for me these days. Still generally very positive, and like, they're just a fun team to watch right now. Like, on offense, like, something is always happening. It's sometimes infuriating and sometimes exhilarating. And then the defense just plays with their hair on fire, and it's super cool to watch. So I'm really enjoying the season so far.
How about you, Jeff? Where are you at right now?
I've been pretty positive. I've been pretty happy with how things are gone. The game Sunday was certainly frustrating at times, but if you read some of our show Saturday, it was kind of what I talked about, where I thought if they scored in one of those drives in the third quarter, they would have put the game over. They would have gone up 10 points or 13 points. And I said, if they score in those early drives, they had 3 drives. One of them was the fourth down. The other 2 were awful. And if not, it was a 50-50 coin toss game. And it played out pretty much like that, where we had to really sweat that out. It got tough. And yeah, there's been the defense definitely was not as good as I was hoping for. But again, that was a tough assignment, 10 a.m. But you can't come out of that game and not be super encouraged by Geno Smith. And Brian's been giving me shit for 2 years now about Geno, and I think there's a case that's the best game he's ever played relative to the opponent, relative to maybe not ever, but maybe in the NFL as a Seahawk. But relative to, he had no run game, 6 drops, he was still 75%. The opponent, 10 a.m. road game, you can't come out of that game and then you see he had 0 off-target passes. So more so than anything else, if Geno's that good, and obviously I don't know how sustainable that is, but that just is so encouraging. Obviously, if you want to think of a negative, it's the interior offensive line is still pretty terrible. And we've seen ups and downs in some certain players, but I know Mike was talking about it was the same with Shane Waldron. I don't know how much Bears that you guys have watched, but Caleb Williams hasn't thrown a touchdown yet. They can't block. Their plays look scattered. And then my guy Jackson Smith and Jizba is getting sprayed all over the middle of the field and got 16 targets. So yeah, there's been a lot of encouraging signs, but yeah, I'm with Nathan. I want to see how they do against obviously better opponents. New England did impress me though.
Hold on a second, Jeff. We're getting a little bit of Canadian internet going on here.
Actually,
unless it's just me.
Did I overcome that?
It's better now, but there was a moment.
Oh boy, I bring up Shane Waldron and my internet up.
All right, let's try again.
Okay, yeah. So anyway, I'm with Nathan though. I want to see how they do against better opponents before knowing what their ceiling actually is, and we're probably going to see in the next couple of weeks with Detroit and San Francisco. But yeah, I can't help but be encouraged by what I'm seeing. I know obviously they're not perfect yet, and they played some weak quarterbacks, and I did come away impressed with New England though. Mm-hmm. They were better than I thought. Jacoby Brissett played a really professional, sound game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but when they couldn't cover Hunter Henry in the first half and it's all they had, that felt like Pete Carroll ball, man. It felt like Ken Norton Jr., Clint Hurt.
It was surprising that he had 130 yards passing. I thought it felt like 200 plus kind of at least, right? I was like, wait a second, what? And I don't know. I'm curious. When Mike was on with us, right? He talked about the fact that, he feels like this is a lot of the same team and it's going to take some time to see differences. I kind of get what he's saying. I don't know if I see it that for me, it feels pretty different. And I do feel that there's some pretty clear differences. Is that just in my? Am I creating that? Am I and like? What do you guys think, Nathan? What do you see?
There's, I do think it's different. Like last week against the Broncos, I don't think you see that night and day difference between the first half and the second half from the Pete teams of the last couple of years. And the Patriots game did feel a little bit more like that, but I don't know. There's just maybe I'm starting to think, okay, am I inventing this? Because the only way I can describe it is like the defense just has a different vibe to it. Like I don't know. They're just like they just have a totally different energy. And I think there's stuff that could have been worse. It's hard because I feel like I shouldn't give Jacoby Brissett too much credit because he's Jacoby Brissett, but like there was stuff that he was doing in the pocket to avoid pressure that was really impressive stuff. And maybe that's just because these guys can't get home and that's going to be a huge problem all year. But I feel like he was really good and like they can run the ball and like Keon White is incredible. And this feels like a game they would have lost last year. So I do think there's just something different and a little bit more resilient and a little bit more pep in their step than what we've seen from the last couple Pete teams.
I mean, Jeff, I guess we went into the season looking at the Patriots, the Broncos as the first two games, Broncos and the Patriots, first two games. I think maybe Broncos actually had like 7-8 wins last year or whatever it was. Like they were close to 500. And maybe people thought they'd be similar or maybe even better this year. I think the Broncos are probably a 3 or 4 win team, like maybe a 5-win team. That's kind of where I'm at with them. The Patriots, I think everyone thought was going to be a 3-win team. I think the Patriots might be 6 to 8 win team, like 6 to 7 probably feels realistic. So neither one of them are going to be probably above 500. But especially the Patriots feel like a team that's going to probably give a lot of other teams trouble this year, my guess. And we don't even know when Drake May starts. That's a totally different group. You know, who knows what that'll look like. But do you feel like the Seahawks, like there's anything they could prove with those two opponents through 2 weeks?
Hard to say. I think they did prove in the Patriots game they can win in different ways. And I think they did prove. I think you're right. I think the Patriots are going to prove to be a tougher team than people think. That they're a lot better coached than I honestly thought they would be. Some of the running stuff they were doing, their offensive line on paper looked horrific. And they have a couple of rookies, especially that right guard, that looks pretty good. And so, yeah, I think the fact that they can play a game where you screw up that many times in Denver in the first half, and you get into a game like they kind of screwed up in the third quarter in New England, and they can still win these games. And I think there is something to learn. You're not supposed to win. Like, it's not college football. There's no style of victory points. Like, you play ugly games against lower level teams all the time. It's a matter of what elements of your team are growing and what's getting better. And I think we've seen enough encouraging signs in 2 weeks that I think there is stuff. Like seeing how they use their receivers in the last game. Like, I don't think how you come away from that and say that doesn't matter because they played New England. Or seeing how they ran the ball in the first game. That obviously didn't carry over. But seeing how they play defense at home and how the coverage has been and how some of the players, Tyrell Dodson's been, things like that. I think that matters regardless of opponent. And I think another thing is like, we learned a lot about Mike McDonald, like in some of his interviews and his processes. And I didn't agree with his decision to like not kick the ball on 4th and 1 in that third quarter to go up 7 points or not go for it at the end of the fourth quarter. I thought they should have gone for it and tried to win the game. But hearing his process, and I sent that clip over to you guys, and then Evan tweeted it out, and it's got like 100,000 likes. I'm like, man, I really blew that one. But like, yeah, I think there is stuff to be learned. But obviously, yeah, quality of opponent does matter, but it's not college football. We have to remember that. Like, you don't get points by winning by 30 versus 1. You win the game or you don't.
I think this team, they've like really clearly learned and adapted over 2 games in ways that I don't think previous teams have done. And I'm more Waldron neutral than I think I'm probably the most Waldron neutral person on the pod. And so far Seahawks offense per EPA is worse than it was last year. But anyways, like they clearly got caught with their pants down in that first half of the Broncos game. They did not expect to be so awful on the offensive line. And then they found ways around that in the second half. And then in the Patriots game, they weren't much better blocking, and they ran it, and like it was super ineffective. But they seemed very happy to just, okay, yeah, like JSN's really good, and we'll just like find ways within our offense to get him the ball a whole bunch and take a shot here or there when it presents itself, instead of like kind of trying to force the thing. Like Pete teams are like, we want to pound the ball, we want to go over the top, and they would like modify ratios of how often they would run, but then they're like still kind of just trying to do the same stuff in the passing game. And it felt like Grubb was able to find more stuff in his playbook to spam to work around these problems. And I mean, a lot of it, Geno being lights out obviously makes that easy, and we've seen him have highs and lows, so we'll see how long this can continue. But I think whatever you think of the quality of opponent, like their process and how they've adapted to the problems that have been presented to them has been pretty cool.
Yeah. I have a question for you guys in a second, then we'll get to some Patreon questions. I know there's some super chats, so we'll get to all that. But so Mike Dugar, when he's on, talked about, the process that Mike Macdonald goes through for fourth downs, for 2-point conversions, all that kind of stuff is different than Pete. Like, he acknowledged that Pete and Tater were kind of just winging it. We all knew it. Pete admitted it much. I think Mike is underestimating the implications of having that kind of rigor for those decisions and what it implies and what I think is happening throughout the rest of the process for how they're coaching this team. I think that their game planning is different. I think that their attention to detail with individual players is different. Here's a hidden story for week 2. How many snaps do you think Mike Morris played in week 2? Any guesses? He played
0.
2 snaps. He played 2 snaps in week 2.
Wow.
So I think that they are very much deciding how they're going to approach each and every week in a way that's different than I think Pete did. And I very much believe in the long-term, medium-term outcomes of having a process that rigorous. And especially if you have someone smart who's had success using that kind of rigor. So like, you can have a rigorous process, but if you're not a good decision maker, it doesn't really matter. Like, but I think Mike Macdonald is, and I think he's got a whole host of them in that room with him. So I think that is pretty different. And the other thing that I'll say, he was giving me a little crap about being youthfully exuberant with my questions and asking kind of like the bright-eyed ones, which is great, because honestly, the fact that I've been doing this for 18 years and I try really hard to stay, a little bit naive, a little bit innocent, a little bit like a fan, because I find like jaded stuff to be really not interesting. So like, but in any event, not about me. I think Mike Macdonald is a first-time head coach, and I think he's got that exuberance for each type of detail that Pete's been at this for centuries. Like, there's just no way he could have, as excited as Pete is about everything, there's just no way he's excited about some of these things, or at least as he doesn't have adrenaline pumping through his body the way someone that's going through it the first time does. So I do think there's some advantages there. But the question I have for you guys, before we get to some of these super chats and get to Patreon questions, who's the player that you're most excited about their development? Forget wins and losses, forget whether the team's good. Who's the player whose development you think has the most positive implications for what this team can become, whether it's this year or in the future? Jeff, I'll start with you.
No brainer for me, Charles Cross. The offensive line has not been a good position group for this team. And when me and Nathan were at the first game, I couldn't even tell what he was doing. I don't know if Nathan's taller than me, so I don't know if he could catch a little more than I could. But no. So when we watched like the film and the grades came out, and then the second game, you still see a lot of protection issues, but none of it really came from the left tackle. And the fact that Charles Cross is the highest graded left tackle in PFF, obviously, take of that what you will. I think that is, we talked about, like, can this guy just be above average? He's been close to, based on PFF grades, an all-pro level player. And for an offensive line that has so few things you can hang your hat on, the guards are in flux again, right tackle's a problem, to have a left tackle that's taken the jump, and if you can kind of fill the pieces around him with Lucas and hopefully get some better guard play if Haynes comes in a little more, but who knows there. But just to have a left tackle that's stable and growing and can play at that Pro Bowl level. I don't know if like number one rated tackle is a reasonable, sustainable path, but I think that is so important to where this team is. And really that 2022 draft class in total between Woolen, Mafe, Ken Walker, like those guys took a lot of steps back last year. And that group is like maybe 4 or 5 of the best players on the team so far this year. To have that group all growing at the same time with the next year's draft class, with Byron Murphy, I got to say Charles Cross there.
Yeah, I thought you might. And I pulled up not just the Seahawks draft class, but all the tackles drafted that year and what their PFF grades are this year. And I mean, Zach Tom is great for the Packers. That was a great draft pick for them. But he's at like a 75, 76 graded player right now. That's very good. We would have been thrilled with that going into the year. Bernard Raymond for the Colts is also a good tackle, not as well known, but has been good since his rookie year. He's at like 78. Everybody else is 64 and below. You know, like Ekwonu for the Carolina is like a 60. Trevor Penning's a 64. Missing from this list is Evan Neal. I don't know.
He's not playing tackle anymore.
He's not playing, right? He's not playing tackle.
He's a guard.
Yeah. So, I mean, Charles Cross at this point looks far and away to be the best tackle in that class that you got at the number 9 overall pick. And he's 23 years old. So I just think, I agree with you. I think that's a huge one. Nathan, who would you pick? I'm guessing Cross was on your list as well. Who else would you pick?
Yeah, I'll go to the next one then, and I think Derek Hall. He, like that play on the last play the Patriots ran in regulation, that could have been the ball game. Brissett had Henry pretty far downfield, would have put them in good position to end up with a field goal on that drive. And Hall just absolutely whipped the right tackle, and he did it around him too, bent around him. It wasn't his fastball that like Mike called it. So that was really, really cool. Like if he can add that element of a speed rush combined with the power that we already know, and obviously like path rush is a super important position. They're looking pretty good there. Like it's not quite like Charles Cross on the offensive line where it's like, can you block 5 guys, please? Because these other guys, I don't know. But it's still really cool development. And he's, that you can't ever put it on one play, but that was a game-winning play that he had at the end of regulation.
That's a great call. And I pulled up that class, so the 2023 class, the edge rushers. Interesting. So Keon White, we did get a first row seat. He was picked about 9 spots after Derek Hall. And being honest, if you could have one or the other, I think we'd all take Keon White and what he can provide, at least so far. But then you've got essentially like Derek Hall is above Will Anderson in grades right now. I'm not saying everyone would take him over Will Anderson,
really?
But yeah. Right now, Derek Hall Hall is a 70 grade. Will Anderson has a lot more pass rush snaps, is part of where I think he has more like overall pressures. But in the snaps that Derek Hall has had, he's been more productive as a pass rusher than Will Anderson this year in creating pressure. So he's above Nick Herbig, above like Lucas Van Ness, some of these names, Byron Young, Tuipulatu. My gosh. Will McDonald, who's my guy. He had 3 sacks for the Jets. I'm not giving up on Will McDonald, but he's pretty low.
Right?
What's that?
Yeah, he went in the first round.
Yeah,
16 overall, actually, like 15, 16.
And the thing about like the cross thing, like you look at all the other tackles from that class, and there's a couple good ones and a lot of trash. Mm-hmm. All those names that you rattled off, they're good football players. Like, And whether Hall is actually better than all of them or not, I don't know. But like that was a strong edge class, and they came away with a strong edge player in the second round. So, yeah.
It feels pretty safe to say he's not a bust. And that's kind of like, that was the concern after last year, is like, whoa, that was a massive swing and miss. I don't think that's what's going to happen. And I don't know, like, I wouldn't be surprised. 6 to 8 sacks feels like possible. 5 to 8, whatever it would be. And that would be a totally fine second season for an edge rusher, if that's what we'll get from Derek Hall.
And he's the complete player too. Like, I don't have, well, I shouldn't say this, because Darrell Taylor showed a lot of pop and stuff too, and some of his rookie
They're
seasons.
already totally different physically in how they play the run, though. Like, even when Darrell Taylor did some things,
he's been
different.
good too, Darrell Taylor.
Yes, good for him. Well. Good for him.
No, but and if you look the year before, Boye, and if you look at like that second round and who went, I don't know if you have that up, Brian. There isn't like a player after those guys for like 18 picks that like hits it all.
That's another one of those names. Mafe, the only guy that has more pressures than him and a higher grade than him from that 2022 edge class is Aiden Hutchinson. Like, he was the second overall pick in the draft. So like, you weren't going to get him, but you got a guy right now that is the closest. George Karlaftis obviously is a good player, but he's well down this list. Ojabo for Baltimore, has had some moments. Trayvon Walker, really, they blew it there. Thibodeau has not been as good this year as he was last year. Nick Bonito's okay, but, again, he's a rotational guy. So, yeah, I mean, that's one of the interesting things that's developing here. And maybe Jeff on Seahawks Saturday this week will do this a little bit more, but I think all like John Schneider's picks, other than maybe I think we'll have some that we will look not as good about, like Zach Charbonnet, but for the most part, a lot of these players are the best of what they could have gotten at that pick, or close to it. So that's certainly nice to the better, to better than the alternative, I would say. Let's get to some Patreon questions. Nathan, if you can look those up, I'm going to get through some of these super chats and welcome a new member. Mr. Latte is a new member. Appreciate you. Thank you for joining. Welcome to the community. Detail-oriented Bobby's at it again, giving away 10 memberships to the channel. And not only Bobby, but Smokehawk as well has gifted 5 memberships. If you want to get these memberships, you got to go click join, click the little buttons to hit the drop-down menu, and make sure gifting is enabled. You might just get a free membership just by doing that. I've seen people do it before. NCLHSEA says, hope you guys are having a good day. We hope the same. What do you guys think of the injury situation? Yeah, Nathan, do you have thoughts on the injury situation? Have you looked at it today?
In my opinion, injuries are bad. So I'm down on the injuries.
These are the kinds of like hard-hitting analysis that we look to you for. Jeff, I don't know. I guess I have two minds on this. One, I'm still learning Mike McDonald and how he's going to approach injuries. And so I see Wednesday injury reports. I almost don't pay attention. But at the same time, if I look back, I'm not sure how many guys did not practice on Wednesday so far that have ended up playing. So I am kind of trying to track that a little bit. They got a long list of outs. Generally speaking, like one of the guys that didn't practice, DK Metcalf, he spoke to press today. Usually if they're going to have a guy not play, then they won't have him speak to press, or at least if there's a question. So I don't know. I think this week I'm not as worried, but I don't know. Do you have any other thoughts beyond that?
No, I think you covered it well. Boye Mafe is the one I'm looking for because Chenna has not been playing, and if Boye is out, that leaves a pretty big hole in their edge rush group where they don't have a lot of proven depth right now. And so that one, but yeah, I'm with you. I'm like-minded there. Wednesday practice is usually a day to rest a lot of guys, and they played an overtime game. It was a very physical game where they kind of got pushed around in the run game. I think there's probably a lot of banged up guys, and so I'm not surprised to see their report as lengthy as it was, but obviously when you see that injury report as big as it is, your caution flags come up, and we got to see what happens tomorrow. But it might just be a big rest day, obviously coming out of an overtime game, and so keep your eyes peeled for the next 2 days.
All right, a couple more, and then we will get to the Patreon questions. Bradley says, how well composed was Brian at the Pats game? I'm sure he's holding in his cheers. The reality is I had to have a place for my nervous energy because I've never watched a regular season Seahawks game and not been able to make a noise, like not be able to react. And I had so much adrenaline pumping through my veins. I was literally like, it was almost like I was shivering. So I took notes. I literally transcribed the entire friggin' game. I wrote the down and distance, the time left, who the play went to. Like, I just was typing the entire friggin' time because that was the only way I had as an outlet, because otherwise I'd just be live tweeting, but I'm not allowed to do that. So I just have to like write it all down and then like wait. So that was my life. Detail says Mike and Brian is back for. Have you figured out Mike's tells yet? Now that you had more time asking questions and interviewing him, or is he an enigma? I think he's an open book. I think Mike's pretty straightforward. I think most people, I don't know if he has tells. The one thing I'd say that's close to a tell is you'll know in the first second if he likes the question you asked him or not. And I've had a couple where I'm like, oh, he didn't like the way I asked him about, giving Ryan Grubb the chance to be in charge of like a third of the team. He's like, I wouldn't call it that he's in charge. I was like, oh, okay. Touched a nerve there. What would you say? But I even knew as I was asking, I was like, that's probably not the best way to frame it. But generally, I feel like Mike's great. And I know exactly what he's going for most of the time. All right. That was all the super chats and the gifts. Thank you guys so much for being generous. And let's get to our patrons, patreon.com/hawkblogger. You can ask us questions every week as well and get access to the Slack channel where the conversation just keeps going, even when we are not. All right, Nathan, what do we got?
Well, unfortunately, we have a few questions in here that were for Mike. So whoops. And oddly enough, they are. Oh wait, no, they're not. Okay, well here, Old School Hawk wanted to ask Mike who was his favorite player growing up, but he's not here. Jeff, who was your favorite player growing up?
From the Seahawks or in general?
Let's do football and just like all sports. Did you have a player like outside of sport, whether it's a baseball, a Blue Jay?
Yeah, I grew up loving John Allred. I know you guys got to see him in the Mariners, and he was like such a good hitter and like the prettiest swing I've ever seen. I also kind of like that he wore that helmet playing first base. He kind of looked goofy, and I don't know, it always made me laugh. But like he was like the guy I always admired. I played first base in softball, I still do. So he had like the perfect swing in baseball, and he's like one of the best, like most productive hitters I've ever seen. So not much on the defensive end, but yeah, I loved watching him play.
Who was your first favorite Seahawk?
First favorite Seahawk. I love Matt Hasselbeck, man. There was something about him. I don't know, because he was like an underdog and no one really knew him nationally. And just like, no matter what the situation, kind of until the end, I always believed in that guy. I always believed that guy could win the game. And even like the game he throws, like we want the ball and we're going to score, like he has a huge comeback. Like, I don't know, man. There's something about him. I just always believed he can get it done.
He had a cool amount of confidence, even if it didn't always work out. Brian, Isaac Lipnick, this is a little bit of a complicated one. He wants your predictions for each of the NFC West teams' record within the division.
Oh, man. I feel like the Rams are going to go 0-6, 1-5. Right?
Is that
like
just injuries? Yeah.
I think it's not just injuries, because that defense just started getting injured. They have not been injured, and they have allowed the second most points in the NFL. I think they have trouble. They have trouble all over the place. I think the cornerback thing that they tried with these older guys, Tre'Davious White, Darius Williams, is not working. And I think that everyone was like, oh, they got guys to rush the passer to replace Aaron Donald. But people forgot Aaron Donald was also really disruptive in the run game. And I don't think they got guys to replace him in the run game. And I think the defense, it might be worse than the Cardinals defense, even if it's got some young talent. So that would be the worst. I think.
And the one win is against the Seahawks, right?
It might be. I mean, just being real. I mean, but no, partially the Seahawks get them at the end of the season. They're later in the season, I think week 10 and then week 17 or something like that. So they'll get back Puka Nacua. They'll get back maybe Cooper Kupp, some of these other players. But the week 17 game looks pretty winnable because I think they won't be playing, but for the playoffs at least. Cardinals, I'm going to go 2-4 with the Cardinals. And then Seahawks, I'm going to go 4-2 with the Seahawks. And I think I'm going to go 4-2 for the 49ers. Does that work out? I don't even know if that like works out. Connecting all the dots.
It's close enough.
Yeah.
Jeff, Hawks fan Matt Mann wants to know, assuming all of the offensive linemen Seattle has are healthy, that includes Lucas and Fant, what is the starting offensive line that you would like to see Seattle roll out there?
I would like to see Cross at left tackle.
Sure.
Christian Haynes at left guard. Connor Williams at center. Bradford at right guard. And Lucas at right tackle.
You're not trying to play Fant at any of the guard positions?
No. I would like ideally if he could play right guard, but
or I guess the other way, I guess Lucas is the fan. Everyone has the fantasy of Lucas sliding in and playing guard, right?
Yeah, if you can get Bradford off the field, that would work for me as well. Like, so I think you maybe have to go 6 offensive linemen, play an extra jumbo, put Fant back at the jumbo tight end position. But yeah, I'm not a Bradford guy. I'm not high on him. He just has too many highs and lows, and especially in the lows category, boneheaded penalties. I don't think any of the young guards on the roster, I don't know, this McClendon Curtis can win the right guard talk. It's kind of gone away. LeMaya seems like a backup at best. So I wish I had a better answer at right guard, but it's just not there.
Yeah. Brian, Cindy says one of the criticisms of Geno in the past 2 seasons was about lack of consistency. Barring injuries, do you think he is in better position this season to be more consistent?
Geno?
Yeah, Geno.
Yeah, I am firmly 2 feet, both hands, full body in the camp of Ryan Grubb is a significantly better and different offensive coordinator than Shane Waldron. I'm going to keep pounding that, and I know there's a lot of folks, Nathan, you may be among them, that don't feel that that's appropriate, and I think Mike Dugar would probably be in that camp as well. I think Ryan Grubb is already putting him in situations to have easier throws to make, more options. I think he's calling better plays in a lot of situations. And don't look now, but the Seahawks are like 13th in the NFL in third downs. Like, let me make sure I'm saying right here. 12th. The Seahawks offense ranked 12th in the NFL in third down conversion rate. They haven't sniffed that for 2 games, definitely to start the year. So, yes, they're struggling in the red zone right now. There's always got to be something, but we saw what I've been seeing in that second game with Jackson Smith and Jigba and DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf didn't even seem like he had a crazy game. And he still had like one of his best games statistically of his career. I think he's got like another whole level that we haven't yet seen, where he is the guy that they're going to, and the other team just cannot stop. We haven't seen that yet. So yeah, I think that's gonna allow Geno to be a lot more consistent this year.
Yeah, and Nathan put out the clip where if Christian Haynes holds his block, he's got another 50-yard touchdown there. So
he was wide open.
Yeah,
not even holds his block, just like doesn't let him get a fingertip on Geno's arm. Like he could have still just gotten absolutely destroyed. But if he just escorted him like a foot farther after that, it would have been easy touchdown.
Yeah. This week's going to be interesting as well because the Dolphins play primarily cover 3. This is a kind of situation where Geno historically will force it into some of the zone coverage that you don't want him to push downfield and tries the tougher stuff and doesn't necessarily take advantage of the flats. I think he's going to do it this week. I'm crossing my fingers that we're going to see, whether it's Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet, or Laviska Shenault, or JSN, or whoever, getting these passes in the flat and getting 6, 7, 8 yards easily and getting the tight ends up the seams. I like that. That's the kind of game that I want to see. It makes sense that should happen. It hasn't always been what happened in the past.
Jeff, Isaac also wants to know if it's possible we're avoiding using Kenny McIntosh and George Holani to keep them as secret weapons. I have opinions about whether any running back is a secret weapon. Do you think Kenny McIntosh or George Holani are going to come in and save the running game?
Hell no. They are not secret weapons. John Gilbert from Field Goals put out a perfect tweet that like Charbonnet's pass protection has been really good. And there's a couple clips of just like plays that wouldn't have worked. And I just don't think they trust any other running back to do that right now. In terms of like the pure run snaps, there's a lot left to be desired. But no, it's not a secret weapon. And I think it's kind of like the tweet I put out with Jamie Sheriff in the offseason. Not to besmirch him or anything, but when you're playing against backups and third stringers, you just look totally different than going against these top guys that are game planning for you. And we all fall in love with these running backs every year, like Troy Maine Pope and things like that. But then the lights turn on in the season and you never hear from them again. So nothing against Kenny McIntosh. He was a 7th round pick. Holani looked pretty good, but I think until they get their blocking stuff figured out up front, I think there's very few guys who are going to look good in this run game.
Brian, Amy Holmes, aka Design Peaches Beach House, said she heard you talking about the Dolphins this morning, the Dolphins offense, and how they like to mix up looks. Do you think going up against a grub offense in practice, who does a lot of the same, helps the defense? Or are we going to be better prepared for that?
Oh, interesting. I thought it was going the other direction. So you're talking about the Dolphins offense versus the Seahawks defense. And do I think that
having
going up
someone
against
like
Grubb's offense is going to help prepare?
Yeah.
I think a little bit. I mean, Grubb does do a fair amount of misdirection in his run game. More at UW than we've seen in Seattle. It has showed up in Seattle, but not like as significantly as I expected and have hoped to see. A lot of what we see in the Dolphins run game is what Grubb did at UW. Man in motion across and then, running back going the other direction, or it looks like the same toss crack play, but then he just pitches it to the wide receiver who's in motion. He goes those kind of plays that put stress on the defense. We haven't really seen that kind. That's probably been my most disappointing thing about Grubb is the run game has not looked creative at all. It's looked like, let's run Zach Charbonnet directly into Laken Tomlinson's ass. Like, awesome. That's going to be great.
4th and 1.
So getting to the answer to the question, I do think there'll be some help there, but I don't think you can prepare for Miami with any other coordinator or players. Tyreek Hill is one of one. Devon Achane is, if not one of one, he's like one of a couple. Jalen Waddle's up there. He's probably one of 8, 10, whatever. He's like, these guys are operating at different speeds than anybody else in the NFL. So I don't think there's anything that you're going to be able to prepare for other than, be on your keys and take the fewest false steps you can because you don't have a lot of time to get where you need to go.
Kind of tangential to this, Mike's press conference, was it today? Did you think it was interesting how he talked about preparing for Skylar, whatever his name is, Skylar Thompson? Is that it?
Yeah, there's something that jumped out to me. I'm curious if it's the same thing that jumped out to you.
Well, at first I thought he like just didn't really want to answer the question, but he kind of talked about it a little bit. And ultimately what I came away with is like, he's just not that worried about that dude. Like it felt kind of dismissive of like, yeah, I'm not losing sleep over this guy. Like, yeah, I don't know. But he also then did like talk about like, well, he does a lot of stuff Tua does, plus brings all this other stuff. So like, do you think he's better than Tua? I don't know. It was kind of, I thought it was interesting. I didn't get a read on it though.
The thing that really jumped out to me, because I was actually going to ask about this. I'm going to ask Ad and Dirty about this tomorrow in a different way. But I looked up, Tua is the fastest time to throw quarterback in the NFL, 2.31 seconds. So like lightning.
Gino's like 2.5, right?
What's that?
Gino's not far behind that, right?
He's
like
2.49 right now, so he's third in the NFL. With Tua out, he's second in the NFL, if you want to look at it that way. But he's very fast. So Tua is the fastest, and Skylar Thompson is not slow, but it was like 2.7. Like that's kind of NFL average-ish. But that's a huge difference in terms of 2.3 versus 2.7 is massive. And coach brought it up on his own. He was like, Tua's getting the ball out really fast. Thompson takes a little longer. He spun it into a positive, like he can extend plays.
Yeah.
But I have to think they're like licking their chops at like the pass rush getting home because they're going to have a better chance to reach him. So yeah, I got the same read you did that he's like, yeah, we're good.
We're going to eat
we're good.
I'm totally derailing now, but has anyone asked Mike about like, I don't know what the numbers here are in terms of how they're converting pressures to sacks. I would guess they're fairly low because I feel like they have a lot of pressures and not a lot of sacks to show for it. Has anyone asked Mike about this? And like, is it something they're like, what do they think about it?
Yeah, I did ask him about it the first week. It's like, hey, you didn't have any clean sacks. Your 2 sacks you got were running a quarterback out of bounds. How'd you feel about the pass rush? He's acknowledged it. Like, and he even today, I think, talked about like, we've got to get these guys down. Mm-hmm. And so it is something that's on his mind at the same time. And Leonard Williams as well. I asked him about it after the Patriots game. He's like, I was like, hey, you going to have a sack every week? And he's like, I didn't have a sack last week. I just had a bunch of hits. So, yeah, we got to get these guys down. So I think they're aware of it. But like you're kind of implying, it's kind of a good problem to have. Like, I'd much rather the Dolphins right now, they're like 28th in the NFL in pressure rate. Jalen Phillips has not looked like himself. Chop Robinson looks interesting, but he hasn't been. I think him against Stone Forsythe, if Stone plays, could be a challenge. George Fant looks like maybe he'll be back. I don't know if that's that much better. I don't know. So, but the Dolphins pass rush has been really bad. So is their coverage. So that's a bad situation.
Jeff, I think last question here from Sam Brown. If Charles Cross has the all-pro season he's on track to have, what kind of contract does he get? And does John Schneider give it to him? Is John gonna splurge to get Cross paid?
Yeah, I think John has been like penny pinching and cheap with certain spots, but certain spots, like guys he's drafted that have turned out, he's made a lot of people the highest paid player at the position, like Earl, Cam, Sherman, all these guys. They paid Marshawn a few times. Russ, they were never hesitant to pay. It was just dealing with that agent. I think Cross as a left tackle who they drafted, they handpicked. I think if he plays at the level we've seen, they'd be totally comfortable playing him. Russell Okung, his play started to drop off a bit right when he was hitting free agency. So I think they were skeptical on what to do with him. It turned out they were pretty right, although they missed him that 1 year pretty bad that they were in their Super Bowl window. But no, I think Cross is going to hit like 25, 27 million a year if he's trending the way he is. Evan would be a better person to ask than that. I've not been studying the tackle market for contracts, to be honest. But I think there's a guy that they would have no problem paying if he's trending the way he is.
Yeah, if he stays this good, even John Schneider can't mess that up.
Oh, what? I guess they got franchise tags too.
Yeah. That's it. That's all for Patreon questions.
Awesome. Well, folks, if you haven't already, join up at patreon.com/hawkblogger. One of the best ways to support the show and also meet a lot of folks. It's a great community over there. People are all friendly. They take care of each other, and the conversations go on all day. So it's kind of like a curated version of Twitter because people post all the relevant information and you don't have to deal with all the other crap. So great thing and great questions as usual. All right, so let's talk about this game. We'll get into the game and then we'll get into predictions. So the Dolphins come to town. They don't have Tua. Don't exactly know what's going to happen with Terran Armstead, their left tackle. He did not practice today. Raheem Mostert, don't know what's going to happen there. Nathan, what's your take on this game? How do you look at this team? Before the season, we're like, Miami, that could be the first real test. Without Tua, does it not match that anymore, or do you still think this is a dangerous team?
I think they're going to get got once or twice in this game. There's just too much speed, and they've relied on some spectacular tackling performances, but they haven't played athletes like this. It's one thing, to go up against those Patriots receivers or Josh Reynolds or something like that. It's another thing to tackle Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. So yeah, they're gonna be tested. They're gonna give up a couple big plays. That just seems like a given. But no, I don't think this is now a game that you feel like if they're going to win a playoff game, they really need to kind of win this fairly comfortably. Which isn't to say 17-point win or anything like that. It may be one of those that ends up like a 5-point game or something like that. But I think they should mostly control this game from start to finish. And yeah, I think the true tests for this team are still down the road at this point.
Jeff, how do you look at this game? I mean, I'll just tell you, for me, I think this is a trap game, like a major trap game. It's hard to even call it a trap game because there's so much talent on the Dolphins. I think coming in and feeling like Tua's out and this should be a breeze is a huge mistake. Partially for the points that Nathan's making. There's a lot of talent, especially on the offensive side of the ball, and the Seahawks have the third most missed tackles in the NFL coming into this game. So that's not a good recipe. How do you feel about this matchup?
I'm a little nervous for the same reasons you talked about. The spread has been going the way you've been talking, Brian. After the Tua news, it opened up at 6, and I looked again this morning. It's already down to 4.5, which means there's been a lot of money on Miami. So I don't know if it's a trends thing. I don't know if it's being concerned about Seattle at all, but I was shocked to see where the spread has gone. I don't know if it's changed. I haven't looked in the afternoon today, but yeah, the bettors are usually pretty stats based, and it's not usually quarterback out. You do the basic logic, backup quarterback against a defense that played really well at home against a defensive coach. It should be a comfortable game, but I think it's a lot like last game. The script is similar. If Seattle scores early and can put them in a hole, I think it should be a really comfortable game. Because I think if you just ask Skylar Thompson to drop back, and as much as they have Tyreek Hill who can create a touchdown anywhere, I think for Miami to be competitive in this game, they have to be able to be in situations where they can run the ball and use that speed and go after Seattle's run defense, which was a bit of a problem last game, and they're banged up at a lot of the edge rush spots. So if Seattle can score early, and there's a lot of reasons Seattle should have some success with some weaker corners, some bad safety play, then it should be a comfortable game. If not, and you're playing into Mike McDaniel where they got guys who can score anywhere, it might be a sweaty game. And so, again, with Seattle's offensive line, I don't know if any game is going to be comfortable. And unfortunately, they should have blown out Denver, and they should have probably pulled away in the third quarter and won by 10 points last game. But because of how bad they protect up front, every game gets a little closer, and the defense wasn't great last week. So you're really hoping the defense comes back alive. They're at home. Hopefully they're not just taking this team lightly because they have Skylar in there. I was really hoping for like this is like a measuring stick game against a team that has. But it's interesting. McDonald's defensive coordinator. I mean, the defensive coordinator in Miami worked with Mike last year, so he's going to know how he coaches inside and out. He's going to know a bunch of their personnel. He's gone up against McDaniel 2 of the last years, and 1 year McDaniel got him really bad, and last year he got McDaniel really bad with Tua when they were peaking. So really interesting schematically, but yeah, I should be more comfortable with the game when we're playing Skylar Thompson, but I'm with you. I'm worried this might be a trap.
Total curveball here. Who was it that asked Mike if Miami's running a carbon copy of his defense?
I can't remember who asked that. It might have been Brady. I honestly don't remember. He did not like that question.
No, he did not like that question. That was definitely one where you could tell it hit a nerve.
Yeah, he didn't like it for reasons that may not be obvious. He doesn't like this notion of the Mike Macdonald defense in general. He doesn't want to be cast in this light of like, you know, he basically wants these guys to be able to stand on their own and take credit for their own stuff and not feel like they always have to defer to him. So I think it's for noble general reasons. But the interesting thing is then they asked DK and asked Charles Cross, like, you know, how much is this defense like what you go up against? Oh, it's the same. Like there's a couple things that are different. Like just like Tennessee had a couple things that were different, but it's the same defense. So like, you know, it is. I think one of the sneaky things here that I'm really curious about, the Bills have absolutely owned the Dolphins for years.
Yeah.
Leslie Frazier was there. And so I asked Mike about that today, and he said like, yeah, Leslie's heavily involved in our game planning this week. You know, but he also said something pretty interesting. He's like, you know, you can't copy other teams. Like, I thought it was interesting to kind of hear his perspective there. And that wasn't what I was getting at anyway when I asked the question, but it's still interesting to hear. But yeah, Leslie Frazier could be a big advantage in this because they like the numbers for Tyreek Hill against Buffalo are completely different than the numbers for Tyreek Hill against everyone. He averages like 80 plus yards a game receiving. He averages like 40 against the Bills. And he had like 30 yards or like he had something like nothing last week. So I don't know. I'm really curious about Tyreek Hill versus Reek Woolen. Who do you guys like? I feel like that's a tough matchup, like especially tough matchup for Reek. And that might be something obvious because Tyreek Hill is great, but like I'd rather him go up against Justin Jefferson than Tyreek Hill, like body type wise. What do you guys think?
I know that Tyreek is like a top 10 rated run defending corner by PFF or whatever. I'm not buying it quite yet. I thought his rep after last year was kind of off, where people were like, he doesn't like want to play the run, and I never saw that. He was always a dude that was willing to like stick his nose in there and try to make a tackle. They were just hilariously bad tackles. And so from that perspective, like I can see where Hill would be a problem. But I mean, if anyone can match Hill's like athleticism and straight line speed, you'd think it'd be Reek. So I don't know that I think it's a particularly bad matchup for him.
You have any thoughts on that, Jeff?
Yeah, the smaller, shiftier guys are a little harder on Reek. I know Sherman had the same problem. Reek's so much faster than straight line than Richard was. But the only players Richard really struggled with his little quick guys. And Tyreek just has crazy speed. But if you look at the splits when Skylar Thompson's played, it's not a big sample. But his numbers are like way down there. He's averaging like 39 yards a game. And I don't know if he has the deep ball to hit Tyreek or I don't know. But I think the one thing that you think about like for this game, and I think the one thing that will keep these guys up and avoid them just like looking past them is like, I'm sure Mike is going to be on them. Like you can't take Tyreek Hill lightly because he can just embarrass you. And the way he runs, he's the fastest guy in the NFL. So they can't be not on their shit. They have to be all over their stuff. But yeah, they're going to have to use either him on Hill or him on Waddle. And Witherspoon is an interesting matchup too. He's a little smaller, he's a little quicker because the Dolphins don't have a third receiver. Odell Beckham was brought in to be it. they had Robbie Chosen Anderson, whatever his name is these days. They've already cut him. The other guy they had was like running the wrong routes on a bunch of plays before Tua got injured. So it's really just covering up 2 guys. They don't really have a tight end they've like a Jonnu Smith fullback by a souped up Brady Russell. But so it's just covering those 2 guys. So yeah, I've seen that like Ayuk has given Woolen a lot of trouble. That's maybe more Shanahan than anyone else. And McDaniel's a Shanahan guy. But McDaniel's stuff is more in the run game than in the pass game. So it's just, I think it's going to be tough, but I think they're going to be really on their stuff because I don't think Mike is going to let them off easy going up against Tyreek and A-Chain and those speed guys.
I'm kind of curious about the other one as well. Witherspoon against Waddle, and sometimes Witherspoon against Hill. Like as elite as I think Devin Witherspoon is, I don't know that he's got like the top shelf speed. And so I'm going to be curious to see if he gets challenged in different ways in this game. Like it's a good measuring stick game. People say like it, without Tua, it's not. I still think those guys are going to get tested in ways, and we'll learn a little bit about them. Because I think Woolen and Witherspoon look like they're about to be like a top duo at corner, and this is a game to kind of demonstrate that.
That kind of answers I was going to ask. Has Spoon been as good as you expected him to be this year?
I'd say mostly yes. I think he has not gotten home on the blitzes. Like he could easily have 2 or even maybe 3 sacks through 2 games. And I think if he had done that, plus what he's done in run support, he's the number 1 graded run defending cornerback in the NFL. And he's been a lockdown corner. He's given up nothing. He hasn't had the interceptions. Say more. What are you thinking?
He's got a couple times, like the first PI on him in the Patriots game was terrible. It was a bad call, but he was beat on that play. Like that was why he pushed him at the end, is because that was all he could do. And then he got another penalty later, and I thought that one was deserved. And he hasn't been bad. I'm not saying that by any stretch, but like I wouldn't say he's met my expectations for him so far this year.
I think that's fair. I mean, we talked about him being a defensive player of the year level kind of guy. Right. And right now, my defensive player of the year, I hate to say it, but he's down to San Francisco. It's Fred Warner. I mean, I don't know if you guys watched that game against Minnesota.
Yeah, I watched it.
Holy crap. I mean, that guy dominated that game. They lost, but I mean, he had full stretch pass breakups, full stretch interceptions, knocked out a fumble at the 2-yard line. Like he's playing at an elite level. Spoon's not doing that to where it's like, holy crap, they cannot handle him. He's not that yet.
No. Yeah. I think he like in coverage, he's been really sound. I thought some of the calls were a little weak. Where like I thought the rule is if you're out of the pocket, you're allowed to push the guys a little bit out the sideline. I thought that was a play where that happened, but yeah, I think Nathan's right. Where like you thought he'd be like blowing up plays in the backfield and be that Kyle Hamilton. It's only been 2 weeks. It took Kyle a bit of time. It took him a couple of years to really maximize him, but we haven't seen him like look like Troy Polamalu, where he's just like throwing himself around and like taking over the games. Like we saw Aiden Hutchinson and TJ Watt. They've had these like just total takeover games, and we've seen them totally dominate some of their first 2 games. And Spoon's been really good, but I think Brian said it well. I think we thought he was like defensive player of the year candidate. He's been really solid. He's graded really highly, but I don't think anyone would come out of these 2 games and be like, this is a top defensive player in the whole league. And that's insanely high expectations, but I think I'm with Nathan on that.
All right, let's get some predictions. Jeff, we'll start with you. Who wins this game and what is the final score?
Okay, I just got to acknowledge we just did an hour and a half. We have not talked Jordan Brooks yet. So pretty crazy considering it's the one game we're going to see him, and it's a big hot topic online. So crazy talk. I think as much as I am nervous, I do like the Seahawks to win this game. I think this is a game where we'll see the value of the new coaching staff. I think if Pete was here, this has a lot of slip-up potential. I think Mike is a lot more buttoned up. I think that he's probably pissed off about how the defense played last week. And I think this is the get-right game for them against the backup quarterback. I think we see some sacks get home. I think we see a lot more disruptive of a scheme. They were pretty vanilla last week trying to stop that run game, and I think it hurt them. I think they knew exactly where to attack them, and the first half was very Pete-like, with unable to cover one guy. So I think the Seattle does pull away in the end. I think Skylar Thompson turns the ball over a couple times. So I'm going to say 27-13.
Big win. Nathan.
I'm struggling with this a little bit because I want to say something like 26-21 or something like that. But I'm also having a hard time. It would be disappointing if Miami scores 2-3 touchdowns on this team. I mean, league average, like teams are only averaging like 2.1 touchdowns. And so without giving them like, a couple safeties or something like that, which who knows? I'm going to say...
Who could ever do that? That would never happen.
I'm going to say 26-20, but I don't feel good about it. It feels like I kind of think it's going to be a blowout, but I don't know. I pick blowouts too much.
Yeah. I find that it does not happen very often. I've got this game. I just feel like the Seahawks have enough advantages offensively. I think the Dolphins secondary has been poor. Jalen Ramsey has been bad. Their nickel corner has been awful, and I think JSN is going to give that player just a lot. I think Cater Kuhu is his name.
That's not a real person. No.
I just feel like, and I think with Geno, as fast as he's getting rid of the ball, I don't think that defense has been able to get home with slower throwing quarterbacks. I think they're going to have trouble getting home in this game. And I think that Charles Cross finally get to say, like, I think he might be able to hold up against the Jalen Phillips and not really like worry about that as much going into this matchup. So I think the offense does enough. I do think that the Seahawks defense is going to got to use Nathan's term. I'm a little more concerned on that side of the ball. I think this could be another game where the Seahawks give up 130, 140 yards rushing, and you're like, come on. But in the end, I think the Seahawks win. I've got it 24-17 Seattle in this one. I think the magic number is if the Seahawks can score 27 points, I feel very good about this. I don't think this Dolphins offense, even if things go well, can put up that many points. But anything less than 27, I think this game is going to be uncomfortable. All right, folks. Thanks everybody for hanging on with us for an extended edition of Real Hawk Talk. Thank you to Mike Dugar for coming on and hanging out with us. It was great to have him. Nathan Ernst at Nathan E11. Make sure you follow him. Jeff Simmons at Real Jeff Simmons. I'm Brian Emhauser. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Hawk Blogger. And this has been episode 332 of Real Hawk Talk. I will be with you tomorrow morning. And if you are in Portland, tune in to, I think it's 1090. I'll be on local sports radio there at 8 a.m. I will be on here 9 a.m. So see you all tomorrow morning. Until then, have a great night.